Hey guys, welcome to the Max Invest YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a review of a recent podcast episode by Hasu and Su Zhu. Now, if you don't know what this podcast is, it's called Uncommon Core, and I'll leave a link to it down below in the description. Essentially, in this podcast, Hasu and Su Zhu sort of had a debate surrounding alternative layer 1s. Su Zhu was sort of saying that Ethereum is becoming a little bit outmoded, and a lot of these alternative layer 1s are attracting a lot more developers and may eventually supersede Ethereum in network activity. On the contrary, Hasu was arguing from a bit more of a technical perspective. Essentially, what Hasu was saying is a lot of these current monolithic layer 1s will start running into a lot of issues that Ethereum is running into now. And Hasu contends that the only credible way of actually solving this issue is through a modular blockchain design and a roll-up centric roadmap. And Ethereum is one of the only chains that is actually using this modular design. Of course, this means that Ethereum will eventually be a settlement layer, and there'll be a whole bunch of different rollups on top of it that are posting proofs down to Ethereum. Regardless, if you enjoy the video, remember to like and subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, and remember, nothing in this video is financial advice. Now, the first thing that I want to do is give a couple of disclaimers about the podcast. Now, I thought this podcast was definitely a decent podcast and it was interesting to listen to. However, I did have a couple of problems with it. Essentially, the first big problem that I had with the podcast is Su Zhu talked for the majority of the time. He was talking for roughly 80 to 90% of the time. Of course, I really do like listening to Hasu, and I do think he's one of the most technical and one of the best people to listen to in the space, so this was a little bit disappointing. The second point that I want to make is Su Zhu did contradict himself quite a bit in this video, where he said a lot of different things about rollups. For example, one thing that Su Zhu said is he said that maybe all of these layer 1s will have the same roadmap in the end and they'll all go down the modular path. However, later in the video he said that Starknet won't pay rent to Ethereum and it will become a layer 1 eventually, which is a very weird and peculiar opinion, and there were just a few different conflicting opinions about rollups that did make it a little bit hard to listen to and a bit hard to understand Su Zhu's point. If you haven't listened to the podcast just yet, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It just depends how interested you are in it or how interesting you find this video. Regardless, the first thing that I want to talk about is one of Su Zhu's main arguments, and his main argument was sort of based around returns and being early. He essentially said that chains like Avalanche and Solana have drastically outperformed Ethereum in the past couple of months, and a lot of newcomers are very excited by this. They want to get into some of these chains early and get a lot of returns on these chains. Of course, Su Zhu said that Ethereum's returns in his opinion were a bit disappointing, where it's still sitting at around the same price that it was in May. However, the argument that I have against this is Ethereum is already a $500 billion network. Of course, there will be other networks that outperform it in the short term. There will be plenty of new networks that start at $1 billion and then go to $50 billion. This will continue to happen and things will continue to outperform Ethereum. However, if you do average out Ethereum's performance and even Bitcoin's performance, it still is unbelievably good. Ethereum is a very safe asset, it's a very safe network, and it still continues to perform quite well. So I did find this argument quite odd. Now, the next reason I found this argument quite odd is because returns do not equate to technology, especially in a bull market where there's a lot of speculation and a lot of people buying all of these different alternative layer 1s. The returns on these alt layer 1s simply do not equate to network usage or technology. There are some alternative layer 1s such as Cardano which have gotten a very, very high market capitalization with not that much activity on the chain, and I do think that overall this is a little bit of a peculiar argument. Now, Hasu sort of pushed back against this and he said, so if everyone constantly wants to be early, isn't this a little bit of a casino? Avalanche and Solana will go up to $50 billion, however, everyone will abandon these projects and go to the next small projects to be early, and it just turns crypto into a bit of a casino. Su Zhu didn't really have that much of an argument against this point. He just sort of said that it is a bit dystopian for Ethereum bag holders, however, I didn't think that this rebutted the actual point at hand. Now, another thing that I want to say about being early is that there's a lot of luck involved. I do have a few smaller alternative layer 1s such as Harmony as trading positions, however these alternative layer 1s haven't taken off. It's usually just a couple of lucky ones that start taking off and start getting a lot more activity quite quickly. So this argument based on returns definitely didn't make too much sense to me, and when these other chains get bigger, their returns will slow down because that's what happens with every single thing. Now, Hasu also talked about the short-term network growth rates on these chains, which in my opinion isn't too valid either, and the reason for this is because a lot of these chains are empty. A couple of months ago, not a single person in the world was using Avalanche. There were nearly no transactions done on it. Of course, when the chain's basically empty, this means that the fees are basically zero because most chains have a fee market. Of course, this means that Avalanche can get some users on board with having quite low fees. However, when the chain starts to fill up, the fees get higher, and this perpetuates a pretty strong short-term growth rate for some of these chains. So, that was Su Zhu's first argument, and I definitely didn't get it too much. Now, the next argument that Su Zhu made is that he said he thinks Ethereum is optimized to be money, and people simply won't use the chain. Now, I found this argument very, very bad for a couple of specific reasons, and I have talked about these on the channel before. Ethereum is actually optimized to be a good store of value and a good form of money. However, the reason that Ethereum is optimized to be money and to be ultra sound is because it's a consensus token that is natively issued by the layer 1. Ethereum's main purpose is to pay for consensus. Individuals will use Ether to pay for gas fees, and these gas fees will be redistributed to the stakers. If we take a look at Ethereum, Ethereum is earning $33 million every single day, and this is way greater than any other chain. Of course, the reason that Ethereum is earning so much money is because it is such a good form of money. And since it's such a good form of money and it earns so many fees, it makes the network more secure. The more earnings a chain can actually have, the more secure a network is. Right now, something like Solana is earning $10,000 to $100,000 every single day, and this makes it a very insecure network over the long term. Of course, this makes Ethereum a long-term sustainable network, and if individuals actually stopped using the chain, Ethereum would become a worse form of money because it would earn less fees and it would be less secure. So, in my opinion, Ethereum is definitely money on top of the Ethereum network. However, in order for it to be an optimal form of money, the chain needs optimal usage. There needs to be a lot of different layer 2s settling to it, and in my opinion, in 5 to 10 years, nearly every one of these networks will be using the Ethereum main chain. Now, Su Zhu then goes on to take a few digs at Ethereum people, where he says Ethereum people are already rich and they don't care anymore. Of course, these points are kind of difficult to rebut because there's no data to back this up. He's kind of just randomly saying things, and I didn't appreciate these points too much. Now, I do want to talk about some of Hasu's arguments, and the reason for this is because they were very good arguments. He actually put Ethereum's value proposition in a very simple to understand way, and he pretty much said everything that needed to be said very succinctly and very concisely. Essentially, Hasu said that the majority of other chains will run into the same issues. Right now, a lot of these chains are currently empty. This means that the fees are lower, so people are using them. However, if these chains start getting bigger, well, they haven't actually solved anything. They'll just start to run into the same sorts of issues Ethereum already is running into. Hasu also said that he doesn't see these other chains as credible attempts to scale. All these other chains are really doing is they're picking another point on the cost decentralization spectrum. Hasu also said that he's seen this cycle play out over and over. New alternative layer 1s start to spin up. They haven't got any technological improvements, and the only promise they really come with is that you'll be early into this chain, and of course they don't solve anything. A lot of them are just copies of Ethereum with the gas limit raised. Some of them, like Solana, are built from scratch. However, at the end of the day, there's not too many innovations in a lot of these chains, and there's not too many solutions. Of course, Hasu said that the first big solution that he's actually seen and the first credible attempt to scale blockchains is definitely a roll-up centric roadmap. And a roll-up centric roadmap makes logical sense. What you're saying with a roll-up centric roadmap is that the computation can happen off-chain. Right now we have a system where there's a set of nodes that are providing consensus for a chain, and this set of nodes needs to compute the transactions and then execute those transactions. However, Ethereum's design is to say that all of the computation of the transactions can actually be put off-chain. Separate entities, which will be roll-ups and sequences, will be able to compute the transactions, and then the proof of these transactions will simply be put down to the layer 1. Hasu said that he believes eventually all layer 1s will need to do this because modular blockchains will obsolete all of these separate layer 1s. So Solana is eventually going to need to choose, do they want to do computation or do they want to do settlement? And in my opinion, a lot of these other chains like Solana and Avalanche will end up becoming layer 2s on top of Ethereum, as this is the best way to scale. Of course, Hasu didn't specifically say that he thinks the other L1s will become layer 2s, this is just my opinion. However, he did say that most of these layer 1s will need to become a modular blockchain in the end. Polynya put the argument quite well here. Su Zhu was talking a lot more about the short term and a lot more about what's popular right now. Of course, Su Zhu is a trader, so he's a lot more concerned about gains, and this is one of the things that made the podcast a little bit difficult to listen to. Hasu made an argument based on technology. I totally agreed with Hasu's argument, and I thought it was a very good technological argument about why we're going to see Ethereum as a global settlement layer, and we're going to see a whole bunch of chains on top of Ethereum, and this is the best way to scale. However, Su Zhu made an argument about short-term returns, short-term development, and a lot of short-term activity. So it made it quite difficult for them to come to an agreement. The last thing that I want to discuss is why it's going to be nearly impossible for other chains to compete with Ethereum. The first reason for this is, as Hasu said, and as I believe, most chains will need to choose between being a roll-up or a settlement layer. So Solana is going to need to choose if it wants to be a settlement layer for roll-ups or if it just wants to become a roll-up on top of Ethereum itself. Of course, the reasons for this is because it's very difficult for chains to pay for consensus, and it's also very unsustainable to do this. The second reason is that it's a lot more efficient for nodes to specialize in their own computations, and overall this is definitely the best solution. Of course, if Solana, for example, wanted to compete with Ethereum in settlement, it's going to need to be optimally decentralized and optimally secure. Right now, Solana is not very decentralized and it's not very secure, so it wouldn't make too much sense. The second thing is Solana have not optimized for data availability. Essentially, a rollup needs to actually post the transaction data down to the main chain, and Solana is not optimized to do this. Ethereum is actually doing data sharding, and what this is going to mean is that the more decentralized Ethereum becomes, the more shards there will be and the more data availability there will actually be. So this is one of the other reasons why I think Ethereum will be superior. Now, the next reason is that Ethereum earns a lot of money in fee revenue, which means it can easily pay for consensus and easily secure itself, unlike the majority of other chains, which definitely makes it a good settlement layer. Overall, it's very, very difficult for these other chains to achieve decentralization. It's one of the hardest things to actually do, and this is a requirement for a settlement layer. The main selling point of these other chains is that they have low fees. However, this would mean that they should just become rollups. As a rollup, these chains can inherit decentralization and maintain their low fees. So, in my opinion, a lot of these alternative layer 1s won't even end up competing with Ethereum. I really do think that we're going to see a modular blockchain future where we see Ethereum as a settlement layer and the majority of these other chains as roll-ups on top of it, and I'm definitely very excited for that future. Anyway, this brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.